experience. I'm still working on that. Um, this is actually a re-upload because this is my first time ever doing any sort of recording or sound editing, really, and I realized, just like last week, that I had done a very bad job on episode 1. And so I went back and tried to clean it up a little bit, both in sound quality and also in pacing, because I guess when I edited it the first time, I thought that pauses were bad. I don't know, but it didn't sound good. So went back and tried to polish that up a little bit. Also did some touch-ups on the book 1 super edit that just has all the chapters with none of my intros or outros in it. Because I realized that some of the volume was a little whack, got real quiet in some parts. So I tried to level those out, and hopefully it sounds a little bit better now. Again, this is a learning experience for me, so thank you everyone who has hung in there with me, and also why didn't any of you tell me it sounded like this? I could have done something. It's okay, I still love y'all. Anyway, I've taken up enough of your time, so I'm gonna bow out now. I hope you enjoy the chapter and the rest of the book as we move on. Thank you.
Book 1, Invasion, Chapter 1. My name is Jake. That's my first name, obviously. I can't tell you my last name. It would be too dangerous. The controllers are everywhere. Everywhere. And if they knew my full name, they could find me and my friends, and then... Well, let's just say I don't want them to find me. What they do to people who resist them is too horrible to think about. I won't even tell you where I live. You'll just have to trust me that it's a real place, a real town. It may even be your town. I'm writing this all down so that more people will learn the truth. Maybe then, somehow, the human race can survive until the Andalites return and rescue us, as they promised they would. Maybe. My life used to be pretty normal. Normal, that is, until one Friday night at the mall. I was there with Marco, my best friend. We were playing video games and hanging out at this cool store that sells comic books and stuff. The usual. Marco and I had run out of quarters for games, right when he was ahead by a lot of points. Mostly, we're equally good at games. I have a Sega at home, so I get lots of practice time in, but Marco has this amazing ability to analyze games and figure out all the little tricks, so sometimes he beats me. Or maybe I just wasn't concentrating very well. I'd had kind of a bad day at school. I tried out for the basketball team and I didn't make the cut. It was like, no big deal, really, except that Tom, he's my big brother. He was this total legend on the junior high basketball team. Now he's the main scorer for the high school team. So everyone expected me to make the team easy. Only I didn't. Like I said, no big deal, but it was on my mind just the same. Lately, Tom and I hadn't been hanging out as much. Not like we used to. So I figured, if I got his old position on the team... Well, anyway, we were out of money and getting ready to head home when we ran into Tobias. Tobias was... I guess he's still kind of a strange guy. He was new at school, and he wasn't the toughest kid around, so he got picked on a lot. I actually met Tobias when he had his head in a toilet. There were these two big guys holding him down and laughing while they flushed, sending Tobias's scraggly blonde hair swirling around the bowl. I told the two creeps to step off, and ever since then, Tobias figured I was his friend. "What's up?" Tobias asked. I shrugged. "Not much, we're heading home." "Out of quarters," Marco commented. "Certain people keep forgetting that the Sleaze Troll shows up right after you cross the Nether Fjord, so certain people keep losing the game, and losing our quarter." Marco kept jerking his thumb at me, just in case Tobias couldn't figure out who he meant by certain people. "So, maybe I'll walk home with you guys," Tobias said. I said sure, why not? We were heading for the exit when I spotted Rachel and Cassie. Rachel is kinda pretty, I guess. Okay, she's very pretty, although since she's my cousin, I don't really think about her that way. She has blonde hair and blue eyes, and that kind of very clean, very wholesome look. She's one of those people who always knows the right clothes to wear and how to look like they just walked out of one of those fashion magazines girls like. She's also very graceful because she takes gymnastics, even though she says she's too tall to ever be really good at it. Cassie is sort of the opposite. For one thing, she's usually wearing jeans and a plaid shirt, or something else real casual. She's black, and she wears her hair very short most of the time. She had it longer for a while, but then she went back to short, which I like. Cassie is quieter than Rachel, more peaceful. Like, she always understands everything on some different, more mystical level. I guess you could say I kind of like Cassie. Sometimes we sit together on the bus, even though I never know what to say to her. "You guys going home?" I asked Rachel. "You shouldn't go through the construction site by yourselves. I mean, being girls and all." That was a mistake. I should never have suggested to Rachel that she's weak or helpless. Rachel may look like a Little Miss Teen model or whatever, but she thinks she's Storm from the X-Men. "Oh, are you going to come and protect us, you big, strong man?" she said. "You think we're helpless just because—" "I'd appreciate it if they'd walk with us," Cassie interrupted. "I know you're not afraid of anything, Rachel, but I guess I am." Rachel couldn't say much about that. That's the way Cassie is. She always has the right words to stop any argument without making anyone feel bad. So there we were, the 5 of us. Marco, Tobias, Rachel, Cassie, and me. 5 normal mall rats heading home. Sometimes I think about that one last moment, when we were still just normal kids. It's like it was a million years ago, like it was some totally different group of kids. You know what I was afraid of right then? I was afraid of admitting to Tom that I hadn't made the team. That was as scary as life got back then. 5 minutes later, life got a lot scarier. To get home from the mall, we could either go a long way around, which is the safe way, or we could cut through the abandoned construction site and hope there weren't any axe murderers hanging around there. My mom and dad have sworn to ground me until I'm 20 if they ever find out I've cut through the construction site. So anyway, we crossed the road and headed into the abandoned construction site. It was a big area surrounded on 2 sides by trees, with the highway separating it from the mall area. There's a broad open field between the construction site and the nearest houses. It's a very isolated place. Originally it was supposed to be this new shopping center. Now it's just all these half-finished buildings looking like a ghost town. There were huge piles of rusted steel beams, pyramids of giant concrete pipes, little mounds of dirt, deep pits that had filled up with black muddy water, and a creaking, rusted construction crane that I had climbed once while Marco stayed below and told me I was being an idiot. It was a totally deserted place, full of shadows and sounds that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. When Marco and I went there during the day, we always found these beer cans and liquor bottles. Sometimes we found the ashes of little campfires back in the hidden nooks and crannies of the buildings, so we knew that people came there at night. All that was on my mind as we crept through the site. It was Tobias who saw it first. He had been walking along, gazing up the sky. I guess he was looking at the stars or something. That's the way Tobias is sometimes, off in his own world. Suddenly, Tobias stopped. He was pointing almost straight up. "Look," he said. "What?" I didn't want to be distracted because I was pretty sure I'd heard the sound of a chainsaw killer creeping up behind us. "Just look," Tobias said. His voice was strange, amazed sounding but serious at the same time. So I looked up, and there it was. A brilliant, blue-white light that scooted across the sky, going fast at first, too fast to be an airplane, then slower and slower. "What is it?" Tobias shook his head. "I don't know." I looked at Tobias and he looked at me. We both knew what we thought it was, but we didn't want to say it. Marco and Rachel would have laughed, we figured. But Cassie just blurted it right out. "It's a flying saucer!"
I'm still an animal. Nobody knows it but me when I slip. Yeah, I slip, I'm still.
Chapter 2. "A flying saucer," Marco said. He'd laugh. That is, until he looked up. I could feel my own heart pounding in my chest. I felt weird and excited and afraid, all at once. "It's coming this way," Rachel said. "It's hard to be sure," I could barely whisper. My mouth was so dry. "No, it's coming this way," Rachel said. She had a very definite way of talking, like she's totally sure of everything she says. Rachel was right. Whatever it was coming closer, and it was slowing down. Now I could see pretty clearly what it looked like. "It's not exactly a flying saucer," I said. "First of all, it wasn't all that big. It was about as long as a school bus. The front end was a pod, shaped almost like an egg. Extending from the back of the pod was a long, narrow shaft. There were two crooked, stubby wing-like things, and on the end of each wing was a long tube that glowed bright blue on the back end. The little spaceship looked almost cute. You know, kind of harmless. Except that it had a sort of tail, a mean-looking tail that curved up and forward, coming to a point that looked as sharp as a needle." "That tail thing," I said. "It looks like a weapon." "Definitely," Marco agreed. The little ship kept coming nearer, going slower all the time. "It's stopping," Rachel said. She had the same strange, not quite real tone in her voice that I had, like we couldn't believe what we were seeing, like maybe we didn't want to believe. "I think it sees us," Margot said. "Should we run? Maybe we should run home and get a camera. Do you know how much money we could get for a video of a real UFO? If we run, they might, I don't know, zap us with phasers on full power," I said. I meant it as a joke. Kind of. "Phasers are only on Star Trek," Marco said, rolling his eyes the way he does when he thinks I'm being a dweeb. Like he's some kind of expert on alien spaceships. Right. The ship stopped and hovered almost directly over our heads, maybe 100 feet in the air. I could feel the hair on my head standing on end. When I glanced at Rachel, it was almost funny. She had this long blonde hair and it was sticking straight out in every direction. Only Cassie looked normal. "What do you think it is?" Marco asked. He sounded a little shakier, not so laid back now that the thing was so close. To be honest, I was a little scared too. A little scared, as in so terrified I couldn't move. But at the same time, it was all cool beyond any coolness ever. I mean, it was a spaceship! Right there over my head. Tobias was actually grinning, but that's Tobias for you. He's never scared of weird stuff. It's the normal stuff he can't stand. "I think it's going to land," he said, this huge smile on his face. His eyes were bright and excited, and his blonde hair was standing up in clumps. The ship began to descend. "It's coming right at us!" I cried. I had to fight the urge to run, yammering across the field, all the way home, where I could crawl into my bed and pull the covers over my head. But I knew that this was an important, amazing thing. I knew I had to stay and see it all. I guess the others felt the same way, because we all just stood there as the ship hummed and glowed and softly settled down in an open space between piles of junk and tumbled walls. I noticed there were black burn marks along the top of the pod section. Some of the skin of the pod had been melted. It touched the ground and instantly the blue lights went off. Rachel's hair fell back down onto her neck. "It isn't very big, is it?" Rachel whispered. "It's about," I tried to think, "about 3 or 4 times as big as our minivan." "We should tell someone," Marco said. "I mean, this is kind of major, you know? Spaceships don't just land in construction sites every day. We should call the cops, or the army, or the president, or something. We'd be totally famous. We'd get on Letterman, for sure." "Yeah, you're right," I agreed. "We should call someone." But none of us moved. None of us was just going to walk away from a spaceship. "I wonder if we should try to talk to it," Rachel suggested. She was standing there with her hands on her hips looking at the spaceship like it was a puzzle she had to figure out. "I mean, we should communicate, if that's even possible." Tobias nodded. He stepped forward and held out his hands. I guess he was showing whoever was in the ship he wasn't carrying any kind of weapon or anything. "It's safe," he said in a loud, clear voice. "We won't hurt you." "Do you think they speak English?" I wondered. "Well, everyone speaks English on Star Trek," Cassie said with a nervous laugh. Tobias tried again. "Please, come out. We won't hurt you."
"I know."
I froze. Okay, I had definitely heard someone say, "I know," only there hadn't been any sound. I mean, I heard it, but I didn't really hear it. Maybe this was all a dream. I looked kind of sideways at Cassie. She looked back at me. Our eyes met. She had heard it too. I looked at Rachel. She was turning her head back and forth, like she was looking for where that sound that wasn't a sound could have come from. I started to get a sick, twisty feeling in my stomach. "Did everyone hear that?" Tobias whispered. We all nodded at once, very slowly. "Can you come out?" Tobias asked in his loud, talking to aliens voice.
"Yes. Do not be frightened."
"We won't be frightened," Tobias said. "Speak for yourself," I muttered. The others giggled nervously. A thin arc of light appeared, a doorway opening slowly in the smooth side of the pod part of the ship. I stood there, totally hypnotized. I just stared, waiting. The opening grew, like a crescent moon at first, then a full bright circle, and then he appeared. My first reaction was that someone had cloned a person and a deer together. The creature had a head and shoulders and arms that were more or less where they should have been, though the skin was a pale shade of blue. But below that he had fur, a mix of blue and tan, covering a four-legged body that really did look like it belonged to a deer, or maybe a small horse. He ducked his head out of the doorway, and I could see that even the fairly normal-looking parts of him weren't all that normal. For a start, he had no mouth, just 3 vertical slits. And then there were his eyes. 2 of them were where they should have been, although they were a kind of glittery green color that was kind of shocking. But the real shock was the other eyes. He had what seemed like horns, only on the top of each horn was an eye. The horns could move, twisting to point the eyes front and back or up and down. I thought the eyes were bad until I saw the tail. It was a scorpion's tail, thick and powerful looking. On the end was a wickedly curved, very sharp-looking horn or stinger. It reminded me of the alien spaceship. It had seemed kind of cute and harmless, till you noticed the tail. The alien seemed kind of harmless at first glance too. Then you saw the tail of his, and you thought, whoa, this guy could do some damage if he wanted. "Hello," Tobias said. His voice was gentle, like he was talking to a baby. He was grinning. I realized I was smiling too, and at the same moment I realized that there were tears in my eyes. I can't really describe how it felt, except that it seemed like the alien was someone I'd known forever, like an old friend I hadn't seen in a long, long time.
Hello,
the alien said, in that silent way that you only heard inside your head. "Hi," we all said back. To my surprise, the alien staggered. He fell out of the ship to the ground. Tobias tried to grab him and hold him up, but the alien slipped from his grasp and fell back to the dirt. "Look!" Cassie cried. She pointed at a burn that covered half the alien's right side. "He's hurt!"
yes, I am dying.
he said. "Can we help you? We can call an ambulance or something," Marco said. "We can bandage that wound," Cassie said. "Jake, give me your shirt. We can tear it up and make bandages." Cassie's parents are both veterinarians, and she's totally into animals. Not that this was an animal. Not exactly, anyway.
No, I will die. The wound is fatal.
"No!" I cried. "You can't die! You're the first alien ever to come to Earth. You can't die!" I don't know why I was so upset. I just knew that way deep down inside, it hurt me to think of him dying.
I am not the first. There are many, many others.
"Other aliens? Like you?" Tobias demanded. The alien shook his big head slowly, side to side.
Not like me.
Then he cried out in pain, a silent sound that echoed horribly inside my mind. For a moment, I had actually felt him dying.
Not like me.
He repeated.
They are different.
"Different? How?" I said. I will remember his answer forever. He said,
They have come to destroy you.
Chapter 3.
They have come to destroy you.
It was strange the way we all just knew he was telling the truth. No one said, "No way," or "You're making it up." We all just knew. He was dying and he was trying to warn us of something terrible.
They are called Yerks. They are different from us. Different from you as well.
"Are you telling me they're already here on Earth?" Rachel demanded.
Many are here. Hundreds. Maybe more.
"Why hasn't anybody noticed them?" Marco said reasonably. "I think someone would have mentioned it at school."
You do not understand. Yerks are different. They have no body like yours or mine. They live in the bodies of other species. They are...
I guess he couldn't think of a word to explain Yerks, so he closed his eyes and seemed to concentrate. Suddenly, a bright picture popped into my head. I saw a gray-green slimy thing like a snail without a shell, only bigger. The size of a rat, maybe. It wasn't a pretty picture. "I'm guessing that was a Yerk," Marco said. "Either that or a very big wad of slimy chewing gum."
They are almost powerless without hosts. They...
Suddenly, we felt that blast of pain straight from the alien. I could also feel his sadness. He knew his time was almost up.
The Yerks are parasites. They must have a host to live in. In this form they are known as controllers. They enter the brain and are absorbed into it, taking over the host's thoughts and feelings. They try to get the host to accept them voluntarily. It's easier this way. Otherwise, the host may be able to resist, at least a little.
Are you saying they take over human beings? Rachel said. People? These things take over their bodies? Look, this is serious stuff, I said. You shouldn't be telling us. We're just kids, you know. This is like something the government should know about.
We had hoped to stop them,
the alien continued.
Swarms of their bug fighters were waiting when our dome ship came out of Z-space. We knew of their mothership and were ready for the bug fighters. But the Yerks surprised us. They had a hidden, powerful blade ship in the crater of your moon. We fought, but we lost. They have tracked me here. They will be here soon to eliminate all traces of me and my ship.
How can they do that? Cassie wondered. The alien seemed to smile with his eyes.
Their Drakon beams will leave nothing behind but a few molecules of this ship and this body,
he said.
I sent a message to my homeworld. We Andalites fight the Yerks wherever they go throughout the universe. My people will send help, but it may take a year, even more, and by then the Yerks will have control of this planet. After that, there is no hope. You must tell people. You must warn people.
Another spasm of pain ripped through him, and we all knew he was nearly gone. No one is going to believe us, Marco said hopelessly. He looked at me and shook his head. No way. He was right. If these Yerks were to wipe out the Andalite ship, how on earth would we ever convince people? They think we were either nuts or on drugs. I don't care if he thinks he's going to die. We have to try and help him, Rachel said. We can get him to a hospital, or maybe Cassie's parents...
There is no time. No time,
the Andalite said. His eyes brightened.
Perhaps.
What?
Go into my ship. You will see a small blue box, very plain. Bring it to me. Quickly. I have very little time, and the Yerks will find me soon.
We looked at each other. Who was going to be the one to go inside the ship? Somehow we all seemed to agree it would be me. Actually, I didn't agree, but everyone else did. Go ahead, Tobias said. I want to stay with him. He knelt beside the Andalite and placed a comforting hand on the alien's narrow shoulder. I looked at the doorway into the spacecraft. I glanced at Cassie. Go ahead, she said, sending me a smile. You're not scared. She was wrong. I was plenty scared. But the way she smiled at me, I wasn't about to weasel out. I walked over to the door of the ship and looked inside. It was surprisingly simple. It looked cozy, almost. Everything was a creamy color with rounded edges and shapes that tended to be oval. That was one of the things that helped me spot the box so easily. It was sky blue and square, maybe 4 inches on each side. It seemed kinda heavy for being so small. I stepped up into the ship. There was no chair, just a sort of open space where I guess the Andalite stood on his 4 hooves while he worked the few controls. There weren't a lot of buttons or anything. I wondered if the Andalite controlled the ship with his thoughts. I quickly reached for the box and started to head back outside. But then something caught my eye. It was a small, 3-dimensional picture. 4 Andalites standing all together, looking like a strange gathering of deer with solemn faces. 2 of them looked like very small kids. I realized that this was a picture of the Andalite's family. It filled me with sadness to think that he was here, dying, a million miles from his family. Dying because he had tried to protect the people of Earth. I felt a small flame of anger against the Yerks, or controllers, or whatever they were, for causing this. I went back to the circle of my friends. Here's the box, I told the Andalite.
Thank you.
Was that your family? That picture?
Yes.
I'm real sorry, I said. What else could I say?
There is something I may be able to do to help you fight the Yerks.
What? Rachel demanded.
I know that you are young. I know that you have no power with which to resist the controllers. But I may be able to give you some small power that may help.
We all looked at each other, all except Tobias, who never took his gaze off the alien.
If you wish, I can give you powers that no other human being has ever had.
Powers? What was that supposed to mean?
It is a piece of Andalite technology that the Yeerks do not have.
The Andalite explained.
A technology that enables us to pass unnoticed in many parts of the universe. The power to morph. We have never shared this power, but your need is great.
Morph? Morph how? Rachel asked, her eyes narrowed.
To change your bodies.
The Andalite said.
To become any other species. Any animal.
Marco laughed derisively. Become animals? Marco isn't the most accepting person in the world.
You will only need to touch a creature to acquire its DNA pattern, and you will be able to become that creature. It requires concentration and determination, but if you are strong, you can do it. There are limitations, problems, dangers even, but there is no time to explain it all. No time. You will have to learn for yourselves. But first, do you wish to receive this power?
He's kidding, right? Marco asked me. No, Tobias said softly. He's not kidding. This is nuts, Marco said. This whole thing is nuts. Yeerks and spaceships and slugs taking over people's brains and Andalites and the power to change into animals? Give me a break. Yeah, it is beyond weird, I agreed. We're off the map of weirdness by this point, Rachel said. But unless we're all just dreaming, I think we'd better deal with this. He's dying, Tobias reminded us. I'll do it, Cassie said. That surprised me. Cassie isn't usually so quick to decide. But I guess, like Tobias, she felt the truth of what the Andalite was saying. I think we should all decide together, I suggested. One way or the other. What's that? Rachel asked. She was looking up toward the stars. Far, far overhead, 2 pinpoints of bright red light were shooting across the sky.
Yeerks.
The Andalite said the word in our minds, and we could feel his hatred. Hi everyone, Daniel here. Thanks for listening to episode 2 of Audiomorphs. I'm still pretty new at this, so I'm trying to figure out the best way to go about distributing this time-wise. 10-minute episodes seem a little short, so for now we're gonna try 2 chapters per episode. If you want to hear more of this bootleg audiobook / podcast, be sure to visit soundcloud.com/audiomorphscast. If you have questions or want to yell at me to get a Twitter or Facebook or something so that you can yell at me more publicly, you can do that through audiomorphscast.tumblr.com or at audiomorphscast@gmail.com. I hope you're all enjoying the ride so far, and I will see you next episode. Bye-bye!
I'm still an animal. Nobody knows it but me when I slip. Yeah, I slip. I'm still an animal.
Occasionally annoying best friend, Marco, Rachel, my smart, pretty, confident cousin, and Cassie, who everyone knew liked animals more than she liked people. Finally, I looked at Tobias. It was weird, the feeling I had at that moment, staring at him, a chill or something. We have to, Tobias said to me. Slowly, I nodded. Yes, we have no choice.
Then each of you press your hand against one of the sides of the square.
We did. 5 hands each pressed against one side. Then a 6th hand, different from ours, with too many fingers.
Do not be afraid,
the Andalite said. Something like a shock, only pleasurable, seemed to run through me. A tingle that almost made me laugh.
Go now,
the Andalite said.
Only remember this. Never remain in animal form for more than 2 of your Earth hours. Never. That is the greatest danger of morphing. If you stay longer than 2 hours, you will be trapped, unable to return to human form.
2 hours, I repeated. Suddenly, some new fear washed through the Andalite's mind. Linked as I was to him, I could feel it as a dread that crawled up my spine. He was staring up at the sky with his main eyes. Something else was up there with the bug fighters.
Visser 3, he comes!
What? I was shaking with this new terror. What's a Visser? Who's a Visser?
Go, now, run! Visser 3 is here. He is the most deadly of your enemies. Of all Yurks, he alone has the power to morph. The same power you now have. Run!
No, we'll stay here with you, Rachel said firmly. Maybe we can help. Again, it was as if the alien was smiling at us with his eyes.
No, you must save yourselves. Save yourselves and save your planet. The Yurks are here.
We all looked up, craning our necks. Sure enough, the 2 red lights were sinking toward us, and they had been joined by a 3rd ship, far larger, black as a shadow within a shadow. But how are we supposed to fight these controllers? Rachel demanded.
You must find a way. Now run!
I jerked from the force of his command. He's right! Run! I yelled. We ran. All but Tobias, who knelt beside the Andalite and took his hand. The Andalite pressed his other hand against Tobias's head. Tobias rocked back like he'd been shocked. Then he too was up and running, stumbling over the loose junk and potholes of the construction site. A beam of bright red lights snapped on. It was a spotlight from one of the bug fighters. The beam lit up the fallen Andalite and his ship. A spotlight from the 2nd bug fighter joined the 1st, and the Andalite shone brilliant as a star. I hit the dirt hard. I saw my leg lit up within the circle of the spotlight. I yanked it to me and crawled fast, scraping my elbows and knees over sharp stones. The 5 of us crouched behind a low, crumbled wall, afraid to move, afraid to look, but just as afraid to look away. Slowly, the bug fighters descended. It was easy to see where they'd gotten their nickname. They were slightly larger than the Andalite fighter and shaped like legless cockroaches. There were small windows like eyes on the forward thrust head of the bug, and on either side of the head were 2 long, very sharp, serrated spears. The Yurk bug fighters touched down, one on each side of the Andalite ship. Okay, you can wake me up now, Marco said in a rattled whisper. I've had enough of this dream. The larger ship began to descend. I don't know what it was about that ship, but as it got closer, I started to feel like I couldn't breathe. I tried to suck in a deep lungful of air and couldn't. I tried to swallow and couldn't. I wanted to run, but my legs were like jelly. I was shaking from a fear so deep it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. It was the same fear that the Andalite had shown when he realized Visser 3 was coming. The ship settled toward the ground. It looked like it was going to land directly on a big rusted earth mover parked there, but as the Visser's ship descended, the earth mover just sizzled and disappeared. Visser 3's ship was built like some ancient weapon. It reminded me of one of those battle axes the old-time knights used when they were hacking off the heads of their foes. There was a main part, like the handle of an axe, with a big triangular point on the front. That part had to be the bridge. At the rear were these 2 huge scimitar wings. It was 8 or 10 times the size of the bug fighters. The blade ship landed. A door opened. Cassie started to scream. I clamped my hand over her mouth. They leapt from the ship, whirling and thrusting and slicing the air. Creatures that looked like walking weapons. They stood on 2 bent-back legs and had 2 very long arms. On each arm there were curved horn blades growing out of the wrist and elbow. There were other blades at their bent-back knees and 2 more blades at the end of their tails. They had feet like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. But it was the head that got your attention. A neck like a snake, a mouth that was almost a falcon's beak, and from the forehead, 3 dagger-like horns raked forward.
Hork Bajir controllers.
I jumped, hearing the Andalite's words in my mind again. They were fainter than before, strained like someone yelling from far away. Did you guys? I asked. Rachel nodded. Yeah.
The Hork Bajir are good people, despite their fearsome look,
The Andalite said.
but they have been enslaved by the Yurks. Each of them now carries a Yurk in his head. They are to be pitied.
Pity. Right, Rachel said grimly. They were walking killing machines. Look at them. But our attention was drawn away by a new form that crept and slithered and shimmied out of the blade ship.
Taxon controllers,
The Andalite said. I knew he was trying to tell us all he could, even to the end, trying to prepare us for what we were up against.
The Taxon are evil.
Yeah, muttered Marco. I think I would have guessed that. They were like massive centipedes, twice as long as a grown man. So big around that if you tried to hug one, your arms wouldn't even make it halfway. Not that anyone would ever want to. They had dozens of legs that supported the lower 2/3 of their bodies. The top third was held upright, and there the rows of legs became smaller, with little lobster claw hands. Around the top of their disgusting tubular bodies were 4 eyes, each like a wiggling globule of red jello. And at the very end, pointing straight up in the air, was a round mouth ringed by hundreds of tiny teeth. Hork-Bajir and Taxons poured from the blade ship, spreading out around the area like well-trained marines. They were holding small pistol-sized things that were definitely weapons. They formed a ring around the Andalite and his ship. Suddenly, one of the Hork-Bajir came straight toward us. He took one big bounding step and was practically on top of us. I hugged the dirt like it was my last hope. I wished I could have dug a hole. I saw a flash of Marco's face. His eyes were huge. His lips were drawn back in what could have been a grin, except that I knew it was an expression of pure terror. Chapter 5. The Hork-Bajir pointed his gun, or whatever it was, around at the darkness. His snake head swerved left and right, trying to penetrate the gloom.
Silence!
The Andalite warned us.
Hork-Bajir do not see well in darkness, but their hearing is very good.
The Hork-Bajir moved closer still. He was 6 feet away now, with just the low wall between us. He had to have heard my heart pounding. Maybe he didn't know what the sound was. Maybe he didn't recognize the sound of 5 terrified kids, whose knees were quivering and teeth were chattering. Kids who were breathing in short, sudden gasps. I was sure I was going to die, right then. I could see it in my mind, the way those vicious wrist and elbow blades were going to slice my head from my body. If you've never really been afraid, let me tell you, it does things to you. It takes over your mind and your body. You want to scream. You want to run. You want to wet your pants. You want to throw yourself down on the ground and cry and beg and please, 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 please don't kill me. And if you think you're brave, well, wait till you're cowering a few feet away from a monster who can turn you into coleslaw in about 3 seconds flat. But then the Andalite's voice was in my head again.
Courage, my friends.
And I don't have any good words to explain it. It was just this warmth that spread all through me. It was like when you're a little kid and you've had a terrible nightmare and you've woken up screaming. You know how it used to feel better when your mom or dad would turn on the light and come in and sit beside you in bed? That's what this was like. I mean, I was still terrified. The Hork-Bajir was still right there, so real and so deadly. I could hear him breathing. I could smell him. But at the same time, I could feel the panic coming under control. I could feel the strength flowing from the doomed Andalite. He was letting us borrow some of his courage, even though he must have been afraid himself. The Hork-Bajir moved away. Something new was coming from the blade ship. Shaking and chattering, I rose high enough to look over the low wall. Every Hork-Bajir and every Taxon was turned toward the ship now. They're all standing at attention, I whispered. How can you tell? Marco whispered back. Who knows when a jelly-eyed centipede or a walking salad shooter from hell is standing at attention? Then he appeared.
Visser 3,
the Andalite said. Visser 3 was an Andalite. Or at least he was an Andalite controller. What the? Rachel said. Isn't that an Andalite?
Only once has a Yurk been able to take an Andalite body,
the Andalite said.
There is only one Andalite controller. That one is Visser 3.
Visser 3 walked confidently toward the wounded Andalite. The Visser seemed so much like the Andalite, it was hard to tell them apart at first. He had the same mouthless face, the same extra eye stalks that turned here and there, checking out everything in all directions, the same powerful yet sleek 4-legged body, and the same wicked tail. But if the Visser looked like any normal Andalite, he felt different. It was like he was wearing a mask, only you just knew that under the fake sweetness of the mask there was something twisted and foul. Well, well, Visser 3 said. I almost had a heart attack when I realized I was hearing the Visser's thoughts. Can he hear our thoughts? Cassie whispered. If he can, we're so dead I don't even want to think about it, Rachel told her.
He cannot hear your thoughts,
The Andalite said.
as long as you don't direct them to him. You can hear his thoughts because he is broadcasting them for all to hear. This is a great victory for him, so he wants all to hear.
What have we here? A meddling Andalite? Visser 3 looked more closely at the Andalite ship. Ah, but no ordinary Andalite warrior. Prince Alfangor Cyrenel Shamtul, if I'm not mistaken. An honor to meet you. You're a legend. How many of our fighters have you shredded? 7? Or was it 8 by the time the battle ended? The Andalite didn't answer, but I had a feeling maybe it had been more than 8. The very last Andalite in this sector of space. Yes, I'm afraid your dome ship has been completely destroyed. Completely. I watched it burn as it fell into the atmosphere of this little world.
There will be others,
The Andalite prince said. The Visser took a step closer to the Andalite. Yes, and when they come, it will be too late. This world will be mine. My own contribution to the Yurk Empire, our greatest conquest. And then I'll be Visser 1.
What do you want with these humans?
The Andalite asked.
You have your Taxon allies, you have your Hork-Bajir slaves, and other slaves from other worlds. Why these people?
Because there are so many, and they are so weak, Visser 3 sneered. Billions of bodies, and they have no idea what's happening. With this many hosts, we can spread throughout the universe. Unstoppable! Billions of us. We'll have to build 1,000 new Yurk pools just to raise Yurks for half the number of bodies. Face it, Andalite, you have fought well in Raven, but you have lost. Visser 3 stepped right up to the Andalite. I could feel the Andalite's fear, but rather than cower, he fought the pain of his wound and climbed to his feet. He knew he was going to die. He wanted to die on his feet, looking his enemy in the face. But Visser 3 was not done taunting his foe. I promise you one thing, Prince Alfangor. When we have this planet with its rich harvest of bodies, we will move against the Andalite homeworld. I will personally hunt down your family, and I will personally oversee the placement of my most faithful lieutenants in their heads. I hope they resist, so that I can hear their minds scream. The Andalite struck! His tail whipped up and over, so fast you couldn't really see it. The Visser twisted his head aside. The Andalite's blade missed the Visser's head by a bare half-inch, but it sliced into his shoulder. Blood, or something like blood, sprayed from the wound. Yes! I hissed. Ah! I could hear the Visser's howl of pain in my head. At the same time, a blinding beam of blue light shot from the tail of the Andalite ship. It sliced into the nearest bug fighter. Hork-Bajir and Taxon scattered. Even crouched behind the wall, I could feel the wave of blistering heat. The bug fighter sizzled and disappeared. Fire! Visser 3 yelled. Burn his ship! The night exploded in blinding light. Red beams lanced from the blade ship and the remaining bug fighter. The Andalite ship glowed and, with a strange slowness, disintegrated. Then, in the flash and glow of the Drakon beams, I saw, or thought I saw, humans. A small group of them, maybe 3 or 4, back in the shadows behind the Visser. There are people over there, I told Marco. What? Are they prisoners? Take the Andalite, Visser 3 ordered his soldiers. Hold him for me. 3 big Hork-Bajir grabbed the Andalite and held him down. Their wrist blades were at his throat, but they knew better than to kill him. That was to be Visser 3's personal privilege. Then we saw why a Yurk as powerful as Visser 3 would inhabit the only captured Andalite body. As we watched, Visser 3 began to morph. His Andalite head grew larger, much larger. The 4 horse-like legs merged into 2 and then expanded, each leg becoming as big around as a redwood tree. The delicate Andalite arms sprouted and became tentacles. This isn't real, Cassie whispered. This isn't real! In the hideous loaded head, a mouth appeared. It was filled with teeth as long as your arm. The mouth grew wider and wider, becoming a monstrous, terrifying grin. There was nothing left of the Andalite body. A monster had taken its place. The roar of the beast Visser 3 had become made the ground shake. I covered my ears with my hands. My teeth rattled from the sound. I heard someone whimpering. It was me. Visser 3 had become a monster that made the Hork-Bajir and the Taxons look like harmless toys. He reached out with one thick tentacle and grabbed the Andalite by the neck. "No, no, no, no," I heard Cassie whispering over and over again. "No, no, no, no." "Don't look," Rachel said to her. She put her arm around Cassie's shoulder and held her close. Then she reached for Tobias and took his hand. I guess you never really know someone till you see them scared, and even scared to death, with tears running down her face. Rachel had strength to spare. Visser 3 lifted the Andalite straight up in the air, tearing him from the grasp of the Hork-Bajir. The Andalite prince struck again and again with his tail, but each strike was like a pinprick against such a creature. Visser 3 held the Andalite high in the air, and then Visser 3 opened his mouth wide. Hi guys, Daniel here. Just Daniel. That's a little bit of Audiomorphs humor for all you fans. We like to have fun here. Well, congratulations on finishing episode 3. I'm very proud of you. What a cliffhanger though, huh? I guess you'll have to visit soundcloud.com/audiomorphscast to find out if Alfangor gets Alfang bored or not. To send me hate mail for that very, very bad, no good joke, visit audiomorphscast.tumblr.com or send me an email at audiomorphscast@gmail.com. I still don't have a cool sign off, but I will see you kids next week. Mwah!
I change shapes just to hide in this place, but I'm still an animal. Nobody knows it but me when I slip, yeah, I slip, I'm still.
Chapter 6. I don't know what came over me right then. I had been so afraid, so terrified, but it was like something just snapped in my head. I couldn't just hide and watch. I couldn't. You filthy! I jumped to my feet. I snatched up a piece of rusted iron pipe from the ground and started to climb over the wall. I guess I just went crazy or something. It had to be craziness, because there was no way that I, alone, armed with a piece of pipe, was going to accomplish anything. No! The Andalite's silent cry made me hesitate. I felt Marco's hands grabbing at my shirt and pulling me back. Tobias and Marco held me down. Rachel put her hand over my mouth. I was trying to scream or curse or something. "Shut up, you idiot!" Marco hissed. "You're going to get us all killed!" "Jake, don't!" Cassie put her hand on my cheek. "He doesn't want you to die for him. Don't you realize? He's dying for us." I shoved Marco and Tobias away angrily, but I was in control of myself again. I peeked over the wall again. The Andalite prince was helpless in the grasp of Visser 3. I saw him held high in the air. I saw Visser 3 open his monstrous, gaping jaws. I saw the Andalite fall into that open mouth. The mouth closed. The teeth ripped the Andalite apart. And the Andalite prince, Alfangor Sirional Shamtul, died. At the very end, he cried out. His cry of despair was in our heads. His cry will always be in our heads. The Hork-Bajir controllers began making a huffing sound, like a whoo, whoo, whoo. Maybe they were laughing or applauding. The Taxon controllers rushed forward and crowded around Visser 3. They seemed to be stretching up toward him, and then I saw why. A piece of the Andalite fell from the Visser's jaws, and the nearest Taxon greedily gobbled it up. Tobias turned away and covered his face. Cassie had tears streaming from her eyes. So did I. I heard a sound that was strange because it was so normal. It was laughter. Human laughter. The humans, the human controllers, because that's what they were laughing, like they were at some kind of show. For a moment it seemed to me that one of those laughing voices was familiar, like I'd heard it before, but then the sound was swallowed up in the huffing of the Hork-Bajir. Visser 3 morphed out of his monstrous form and slowly regained his Andalite body. Ah! I heard him think. Nothing like a good Ontarian Bogmorph for taking a bite out of your enemies. Again, the human controllers laughed, and the Hork-Bajir controllers huffed, and I heard a familiar human laugh I could not quite place. Marco started throwing up. It was an understandable thing to do, but somehow the sound caught the attention of the nearest Hork-Bajir. The snake had turned. He was perfectly still. We were perfectly still. The Hork-Bajir turned toward us. The nearsighted eyes were aimed directly at our little hiding place. I don't know who panicked first. Maybe it was me. Maybe we'd all just had all the fear and horror we could stand. It was like an electric shock went through all of us. We were running before I had a chance to even know what I was doing. I ran. I gasped for air. A cry went up from the Hork-Bajir. "Split up!" I yelled. "They can't follow all of us!" Marco and Tobias and Cassie took off in 3 different directions. Rachel was still right beside me. Glancing back, I saw the Hork-Bajir hesitate, unsure who to chase. Rachel and I are the fastest runners. Tobias is totally out of shape, and Marco and Cassie are too short to be really fast. So I figured if the aliens were going to chase anyone, it ought to be us. I guess Rachel thought the same thing. She slowed down just a little and began yelling and waving her arms. Come on, you!" And then she said some words I didn't realize Rachel even knew. The 2 nearest Hork-Bajir snapped around and took off after us.
Kafrash, here! Kafrash, fit! Enemy, get!
Even in my panic, it surprised me. They were talking some mix of their own alien language and ours.
Kafrash, fit Nahar! I get! I kill!
I ran. Suddenly my foot slammed something and I was down. I hit the ground hard. The wind was knocked out of me. I tried to fill my lungs again. Rachel ran on. She didn't know I had fallen. A spear of red light struck a concrete pipe just beside me. The concrete vaporized. The 2 Hork-Bajir were coming after us, bounding like some devil kangaroos. I was up and running. Rachel must have realized I wasn't with her anymore. She stopped and started to come back toward me. "Don't be an idiot!" I yelled. "Run!" She hesitated just a second, but she knew she couldn't do anything more for me. She ran. I saw a dark hole ahead and raced toward it. A doorway. Inside it was as black as a grave. It was one of the buildings that had been almost completed, just bare concrete walls and scattered junk. But I knew I had been in here before. Marco and I had walked all through it. There were hallways and little side rooms. It was like a maze. Marco, Rachel, had they gotten away? And what about Cassie and Tobias? I tried to get my brain to concentrate as I scurried along the first big room. There was a corridor somewhere. I groped in the dark and found a wall. I heard the sound of claw-like feet. Huge, tearing, rending claw feet scraping over the bare concrete. A bottle went skittering across the floor. The Hork-Bajir was close, and in the total darkness, my superior human vision wasn't much use, but I knew my way around the empty building. At least, I would have known my way around if my brain had been working. I felt my hand go into emptiness. A doorway, yes! It led down a hallway. I went through just as the light came on behind me. Someone had brought a flashlight.
If none to tell valet noit fit? Whatever order.
No need to capture them. Whoever you find, kill. The first voice had been Hork-Bajir. The second voice was human. And the weird thing was, the voice sounded familiar. I tried to think. I knew I'd heard that voice somewhere. Where? Where? Just save the head, the human told the Hork-Bajir. Bring that to me and we can identify it. I slid quickly along the wall. The light followed just steps behind me. I racked my brains. Had there been a passageway? Yes, there it was. As silently as I could, I slipped into it. The flashlight beam was just inches behind me. I kicked something soft. Hey! It was a man. He had been lying on the ground, wrapped in a blanket. Hey, get out of here! This is my place, and I ain't got nothing for you to steal. I started to warn him, but one of the Hork-Bajir was there. The flashlight landed on the homeless man's face. He blinked like an owl. There was an alcove right behind me. I backed through. The homeless guy screamed. I heard the sound of a scuffle. Maybe the guy got away. I hope so. But I never found out because with the Hork-Bajir distracted, I ran. I ran and ran and ran. And as I ran, I really hoped it was all a dream. Chapter 7. Somehow I made it home. I don't know how. I have no memories of anything after that last sight of the Hork-Bajir. I wish I had no memories of anything that happened that night. If only I could forget it all. I called around to the others. Everyone was shaky, but they were all alive. Rachel kept trying to apologize for leaving me. Marco just kept asking me if I was sure this wasn't a dream. I guess I should have had the worst nightmares of my life that night, but I didn't. The world of nightmares was a joke compared to my new reality. But by the next morning, a Saturday, I half believed it had all been a nightmare. The only thing that seemed real, really real, was the way the Andalite had of smiling with just his eyes. I woke when my mom started pounding on my door. "Jake, are you awake in there?" I was now. Yeah, I groaned. "I'm up." "Your friend Tobias is here." "Tobias? What was Tobias doing here?" "It's me," Tobias's voice. "Can I come in?" Sure." I sat up in my bed and blinked several times, trying to get my eyes unglued. The door opened. I heard Tobias say thank you to my mom. He was glowing. I swear, he was glowing. Not like he was radioactive or anything, I don't mean that. It's just that his eyes were shining bright, and his face was one big grin, and he seemed to be tingling with energy, bouncing like he couldn't stand still. "I did it," Tobias said. I tried to get my hair to go in one direction by raking my fingers through it. "What are you talking about?" I was yawning when he answered. "I became Dude." I stopped yawning. My mouth actually snapped shut. Dude is Tobias's cat. Huh? Tobias glanced around like there might be spies in the room. I became Dude, just like the Andalite said. I just stared. It was so amazing. It didn't hurt or anything. I was petting him and thinking about the whole thing last night, right? So I thought, why not give it a try? He was pacing back and forth, snapping his fingers, bursting with enthusiasm. Very unlike Tobias. I didn't even know how to begin, so I just made sure the door to my room was locked. Fortunately, my uncle was still asleep. Tobias has the most screwed up family I know. He never knew who his father was, and his mother just decided to leave him a few years ago. Since then, he'd been shuffled back and forth between his uncle here and his aunt, who lives on the other coast. His aunt and uncle can't stand each other, and it's like Tobias is some burden they tried to shove off on the other. I get the feeling that neither of them cares about Tobias. So there I was, just sitting on my bed, thinking about it, concentrating, thinking about becoming Dude. I looked down at my hand. He grinned at me. "What do you think I saw, Jake?" I shook my head slowly. "I don't know." I had fur, Jake, and I was growing claws. Should have seen the real Dude. He went nuts. I had to put him outside before I could morph all the way. He clawed me up pretty good. Tobias stuck a sliced finger into his mouth. I swallowed hard. Okay, this was definitely crazy now. Tobias, is it possible you maybe just dreamed all of this?" "Not a dream," he said. Now he was serious, Tobias again. The grin was gone. "It's all true, Jake. All of it." His eyes met mine. I knew what he was saying. He had tried to pretend it was all a nightmare, too. But it was real. I looked away. I didn't want to start believing that it had all been real. I wanted it all safely stored away in my head. Just another bad dream. Bad dreams should stay in your head, not come jumping out into real life. "I just kept concentrating on changing," Tobias said. "And in a few minutes I was not myself anymore." His eyes bored in on me. "You have no idea what it's like, Jake. Being a cat, I can't even describe it. You're so strong, for one thing. Just all this coiled power, and the way you can move. You know what I did? I jumped onto my dresser. 3 feet straight in the air, and I landed like a feather. 3 feet! You know how high that is when you're a cat? It's like a person jumping maybe 30 feet straight up." He stopped suddenly and looked at me. "You don't believe me, do you?" he said. "Look, Tobias, it's just that sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between something real and something you're just imagining or dreaming. You think I'm crazy?" I considered for a minute. "I don't know, Tobias. Let's review the facts. You say you turned into your own pet cat. Turned into an actual cat." "Yes, I have to say that sounds crazy to me." Tobias nodded thoughtfully. He gave me a little smile. "I understand, Jake. You still don't want it to be true." "What? You mean do I want to believe that you can change yourself into a cat? And all the rest of it? Do I want to believe that the Earth is being invaded by slimy slugs who live in people's brains and turn them into slaves? Do I want to believe duh, no, I don't want to believe any of it." "And how about the Andalite?" he said in a quiet voice. I hesitated. I don't know why, but I didn't just want to pretend the Andalite away. Tobias put his hand on my arm. "Stand right there." What are you going to do? I'm going to help you decide whether it's real or not. Tobias, just wait, and don't scream or anything. So I waited. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Tobias just stood there. I glanced at his face. His eyes were different. The pupils weren't completely round anymore. I swear there was a reflective greenish light in them, and his mouth was protruding a little, puffing out. He was shrinking, growing smaller right before my eyes. The neck of his shirt was loose. His pants started scrunching up at his ankles. He was shriveling, and at the same time, fur, yes, fur, began to grow on his hands and neck and face. It was gray, striped with black, just like dudes. I had this absurd desire to start giggling. Tobias was becoming a tabby cat, but I knew if I started giggling, I'd just keep on and never ever be able to stop. Tobias was more cat than human now. The pointed ears rose atop his head. The whiskers stuck straight out from beneath his delicate pink nose. He had dropped to all fours, clothing now half draped over him, like so many rags. His tail twitched. Yes, his tail. I wondered if I would just drop dead from the lump that had filled my throat, or from the jackhammer pounding of my heart. Then I wondered if I was still asleep. But if this was a dream, it was a really convincing one. I was standing there in my bedroom, staring down at a gray-black cat that less than 2 minutes earlier had been my friend Tobias. Chapter 8. I hope I'm asleep, I muttered. I really do. You're not asleep. Is that you? I demanded of the cat. Can you hear me? Tobias sounded surprised, although sounded wasn't quite the right word. Yes, I said cautiously. I didn't know I could send thoughts like this, Tobias said. Just like the Andalite. I guess it only works when you're morphed. I'm talking to a cat, I realized, and I thought Tobias was crazy? I wondered if Tobias could hear my thoughts. I concentrated. Tobias, can you hear me? Yeah, he said. I hear you. Did you hear my thoughts before that? I asked. No, I don't think it works that way. I think you have to think at me for me to hear. Hey, watch this. Suddenly, Tobias leapt through the air. He pounced precisely on an autographed baseball that was lying in the corner. Maybe a 4-foot jump. This is so excellent. Hey, pull a string for me to chase. Pull a string? Why? Because it's fun. I dug into my desk drawer and found a length of string left over from a birthday gift. I'm not exactly big on keeping my room clean. The string was from a birthday 2 years ago. How's this? I drew the string slowly across the floor, a foot or more from Tobias's nose. He settled back on his haunches and began wiggling his hindquarters. He pounced. He landed on the string, grabbing it with his sharp teeth, rolled over, and began ripping at the string like it was the only thing on earth that mattered. I tried to pull the string away, but he pounced again. Yes, got it! Tobias, what are you doing? Pull it faster, I see it, I got it! Tobias, what are you doing? I shouted. You're playing with a string! Suddenly, he stopped. His tail twitched. He looked up at me with those cold cat eyes. I'm sure I saw a look of confusion there. I don't know, he admitted. It's like, I'm me, but I'm also dude. I want to chase the string, and oh man, if there was a real-life mouse around, I'd really love to track it, to follow it so quietly, to listen to its heartbeat, to hear its scratchy little feet. I'd wait till just the right moment, and then a perfect pounce through the air, claws stretched out. He extended his claws to demonstrate. Tobias, I think we're learning something here, I said. Amazing how quickly I was becoming used to the idea of talking to a cat. What? What are we learning? I think you aren't just Tobias. I think you really are a cat. I mean, you have all the same instincts. You want to do things a cat wants to do. Yes, I can feel it. It's like I'm two different animals melded into one. I can think like a person, and like a cat. You better change back, I said. He nodded his cat head up and down. Very weird to see, I can tell you. A cat nodding yes in a thoughtful, normal way. You're right. The change back to human form was at least as strange as the change to cat. The fur disappeared, leaving bare patches of pink skin behind. A nose grew out of the flat cat face. The tail was sucked up like a snake going up a vacuum cleaner. Tobias stood there, looking embarrassed. He quickly put on his clothes. Maybe with some practice we can figure out how to change back into our clothes. We? He smiled, his gentle smile again. Don't you get it yet, Jake? If I can do it, so can you. I shook my head. I don't think so, Tobias. Suddenly, he grew angry. He grabbed me by both my shoulders and actually shook me. Don't you understand, Jake? It's all true. All of it. I pushed him away. I didn't want to hear it, but he kept after me. Jake, it's all true. The Andalite gave these powers to us for a reason. Fine, I snapped. You use them. I will, he said, but we need you, Jake. You most of all. Why me? He hesitated. Geez, Jake, don't you understand? I know what I can do and what I can't do. I can't make plans and tell people what to do. I'm not the leader. You are. I laughed rudely. Huh! I'm not the leader of anything. He just looked at me with those deep, troubled eyes. Eyes I can now see only in my memory. Yes, Jake, you are our leader. You are the one who can bring us all together and help us defeat the controllers. We have the ability to be much more than we are, to have the stealth of a cat, and the eyes of an eagle, and the sense of smell of a dog, and the speed of a horse or a cheetah. We're going to need it, all of it, if we have any hope of holding out against the controllers. I wanted it not to be true. I wanted none of it to be true, but I knew that it was. I nodded slowly. It felt like I was agreeing to something awful, like I was volunteering for a trip to the dentist or something much worse. It felt like 1,000,000 pounds of weight had just landed on my shoulders. I knew what I had to do next. Well, I said grimly, I guess I'd better go find Homer. Homer, that's my dog. Hey all you listeners out there, it's your host and friend, Daniel. We did it! We made it through another episode of this wacky thing we call life. We call audiomorphs. That's the name of the show. Today I want to give a special shout out to my neighbor's dog, whom I hate very much, because, listen. Let me tell you about this dog. This dog that whenever anyone walks by their house or like down the street or like just anywhere, this stupid dog decides it needs to bark for the next 20 minutes non-stop. And the very bad acoustics of this house picks that up, and while also my window is like directly next to this dog, like it's about 2 feet is the distance between my window and the neighbor's house where the dog is outside and barking, and I hate it very, very much, and it makes me very angry. Anyway, to hear more of this podcast, please visit soundcloud.com/audiomorphscast or audiomorphscast.tumblr.com. You can reach me at audiomorphscast@gmail.com. Please, I'm very lonely. Also, listen, as long as we're here, as long as we're chatting, listener, I tried to Google audiomorphscast to see what my SEO is. Turns out it's very bad. Because there's a band called Audiomorphs, which is the reason why my SoundCloud is audiomorphscast. And yeah, that's just all that comes up when you Google this. So I guess like tell a friend, because they're not gonna find it on Google. But I will see you next week. Bye bye.
But I'm still an animal. Nobody knows it but me when I slip. Yeah, I slip, I'm still.
Chapter 9. It isn't painful. Morphing, I mean. I petted Homer for a while, feeling like a complete and total fool. This is the stupidest thing I've ever done, I told Tobias. Look, you have to concentrate. At least I did. I mean, I formed this mental picture of Dude, right? I thought about becoming him. I see, so I have to, meditate on becoming a dog. That's right, you have to think about it. You have to want it. Normally I would have figured he was nuts, but I had just seen him turn into a cat. So if he was nuts, so was I. I thought about becoming Homer. As I stroked his fur, I formed a picture in my mind of me becoming Homer. Homer became weirdly quiet while I did it, like he was asleep, only his eyes were open. Just like Dude, Tobias commented. I think the process kind of puts the animal into a trance or something. He's just scared because he thinks his master is Looney Tunes. I continued stroking Homer's fur and concentrating, and Homer continued to lie very still. Okay, now what? I asked Tobias. Now we better put Homer outside. He might get slightly freaked out by watching you turn into him. It took Homer about 10 seconds to come out of his trance, but then he jumped up, normal, hyperactive Homer again. I put him outside in the yard. Tobias was sitting patiently when I got back, just waiting. Give it a try, he urged me. Think about it. Want it. I took a deep breath. I closed my eyes. I recalled the picture of Homer I'd formed in my mind. I thought about becoming Homer. I opened my eyes. Bow wow, I said, laughing. Guess it didn't work for me, Tobias. The back of my hand itched, and I scratched it. Jake? Tobias said. What? Look at your hand. I looked at my hand. It was covered in orange fur. I jumped about a foot straight up in the air. Oh! I stared at my hand. The fur stopped growing. Don't be scared, Tobias advised. Go with it. Now you've stopped the morph. You have to concentrate. My hand, I said. Fur! Yeah, and your ears, Tobias said. I ran over to the mirror by my dresser. My ears had moved. They had slid up the side of my head, and were definitely larger than they should be. Go on, it's so cool, Tobias said. Cool, it's creepy, it's weird, look at my hands, I have fur! You have to do this, Tobias said. I don't have to do anything, I said sullenly. Tobias nodded. Okay, you're right, you don't have to do this. You can just forget what we saw last night, and forget what we know. And the Yurks can take over more and more people, you can just ignore it. We can all just go along and grow up in a world where human beings are nothing but bodies to be used by murdering aliens. Okay, when he put it that way, it didn't sound like a great option. Come on, Tobias urged. I swallowed hard. I closed my eyes. I thought of Homer, of being Homer. And when I opened my eyes, there was fur growing on my arms, and fur growing out of my face, and fur curling up from under my collar. My legs itched, and I realized there was fur growing there too. My bones, well, they didn't hurt exactly, but they did feel very strange. You know when you go to the dentist and he gives you Novocaine so the drill doesn't really hurt, but you know it should hurt? I guess that's what it's like. My bones shortened. I could feel my backbone stretching as it extended out into a tail. There was a scraping sound as my knees suddenly reversed direction. I toppled forward, no longer able to walk upright. When my hands hit the floor, they weren't exactly hands anymore. The fingers were gone. All that was left were short, stubby nails. My face bulged out. My eyes drew closer together. Tobias got up and tilted the mirror down so I could see myself. I watched the final transformation as the last patches of my pink human flesh disappeared, and the tail, my tail, sprouted to its full length. I was a dog. It was insane, but just the same, I was a dog. I knew I should be scared by all of this, only I wasn't. I was ecstatic. I was giddy. I was thrilled. Happiness washed over me. Happiness filled me up. I breathed in through my ridiculously long nose and wow! The smells! Oh man! You have no idea! I breathed in and right away I knew my mom was toasting a waffle in the kitchen. And I knew Tobias had walked through the territory of a big male dog. And I knew things I couldn't even explain in human words. It was like being blind all your life and then suddenly you can see. I ran over to Tobias and sniffed his shoe. I wanted a better idea of who that big male dog was. From the scent of his urine picked up by Tobias's shoe, I got a sort of picture of him. See, Homer knew him. His owners called him Streak. He was neutered, like me. He spent most of his time in his yard, but he broke out sometimes by digging under his fence. He got a mix of canned and dry food, farina, no table scraps, unlike me. All this information made me happy all over again, and I had to wag my tail. I looked up at Tobias. He looked tall and strange, and not very colorful. I wasn't all that interested in looking at stuff. Smelling things was way better. Intruder! There was a noise in the yard. A dog! An unknown dog in my yard. An intruder! I ran to the window and perched against it and cut loose. I barked as loud as I could. No way some unknown dog was just gonna walk through my yard. Jake, get a grip, Tobias said. That's Homer out there. Homer? What? But I tucked my tail between my legs. What was going on? Jake, listen to me, Tobias said. It's just like what happened to me when I morphed into a cat. The dog brain is part of your brain now. You have to deal with it. But there's a dog in my yard. That's Homer, Jake. You are Jake. You're just in the body copied from Homer's DNA. That's the real Homer out there. You put him out there. Focus. You are Jake. Jake. I took several deep breaths. The smells! Oh boy, there's this one smell I couldn't quite... Focus, Jake, I ordered myself. Focus. Slowly, I calmed the dog part of my mind. Let go of the smells. Let go of the sound of the dog in your yard. It wasn't easy that first time. Being a dog is so completely amazing. For one thing, there's nothing halfway about it. You're never sort of happy. You're happy! And you're never sort of bummed. You're totally, completely bummed. And boy, when you get hungry in dog form, you are nuts on the subject of food. There was a knock on my bedroom door. Yes, my bedroom door. I knew who I was again. I was Jake. Jake with 4 legs, a tail, and a snout, but Jake. The knocking seemed incredibly loud to my dog ears. Jake, you got Homer in there with you? My brother Tom's voice. Mom's on the phone. Tell him to stop yapping. He opened the door and stepped in. He looked around confused. Who are you? He demanded of Tobias. I'm Tobias. I'm Jake's friend. Well, where is he? Oh, he's around, Tobias said. Tom looked down at me. There was a strange smell about him. My dog brain couldn't quite identify it. It was an unsettling, dangerous smell. And somehow, in my own mind, I heard the echo of a laugh. A very human laugh I had heard the night before as Visser 3 swallowed the Andalite whole. Bad dog, Tom said to me. You keep quiet. Bad dog. And he left. I was devastated. I wasn't a bad dog. Not really. I was just barking because some other dog was in my yard. Bad dog? I was a bad dog? No, I wanted to be a good dog. I crept into the corner, utterly miserable. Tobias knelt down and patted my head. When he scratched me behind the ears, I felt a little better. Chapter 10. I called all the others on the phone after I got done morphing back into my normal body. Tobias took off on his own, saying he'd hook up with us later at Cassie's farm. I was on the kitchen phone with Cassie when Tom came in. Oh, there you are, he said. I covered the mouthpiece. Yeah, Tobias said you were looking for me before. I just wanted you to shut your dog up, Tom said. He turned his chair around backward and straddled it. I hesitated. For some reason, I didn't want to talk to Cassie with Tom listening in. I'll see you in a couple hours, okay? I told Cassie, and hung up. I looked over at Tom. He's bigger than me, even though I'm not exactly small. His hair is darker, almost black, while mine is brown. I had always trusted him. He wasn't like a lot of guys who pound on their younger brother. We were always kind of close. At least, until the last year or so. Somehow, we just weren't spending as much time together. Partly, it was that he was involved with this club called The Sharing. They did all this stuff together, so he was busy a lot of the time. The thing is, Tom should have been the very first person I told about all the stuff that had happened. But as I was sitting there, watching him munch his toast, I just had this feeling that said no, this has to be a secret, even from Tom. Instead, I told him the other thing I was afraid to tell him. I didn't make the team, I said. What team? He asked. He looked puzzled. What team? The basketball team. Your old team. Oh, too bad, he said. Too bad? I repeated. I could not believe how little he seemed to care. It's just sports, he said. He munched another big bite of toast. Just sports? I couldn't stop repeating what he said. Tom, saying sports were no big deal? No way. He lived for sports. Yeah, I guess I just don't have your total skill. He shrugged. Well, I quit the team anyway, a couple of days ago. I practically fell out of my chair. You quit? You quit the team? And you didn't even talk to me about it? What's the deal? I didn't say anything because I knew you and Dad would make a big thing out of it. Look, there are more important things than throwing balls through hoops, he said. He had this mysterious look in his eyes. I figured he meant girls were the more important thing. Besides, he added, we do much cooler stuff at the Sharing. Maybe you should join up. I was stunned. Obviously, Tom and I were further apart than I had realized. When we were done talking, I headed outside to mow the lawn. I mow the lawn every Saturday. It's my major chore. That and taking out the trash, which I hate, because we have to do all this recycling stuff. When I was finally done mowing and trimming and raking, I hopped on my bike and took off. I had an arrangement with everyone to hook up at Cassie's farm. It isn't exactly a normal farm, although it had been in the old days, and they still do have horses and a cow, but now the big red main barn is the Wildlife Rehabilitation Clinic. Cassie's father runs it. They take in any kind of injured animal except pet-type animals. There are always lots of birds, along with squirrels and deer and skunk and so on. Sometimes they get a bobcat or a fox or even a wolf. Cassie's mom is a vet too, but she works at the Gardens. That's this huge amusement park that's also a zoo, or I guess they call it a wildlife park. Luckily, Cassie really loves animals. It would have been hard, having her parents, if she didn't really love animals. Me, I have a dog. Tobias has a cat. Cassie has everything from porcupines to polar bears. By the time I got there, Marco, Tobias, and Rachel were already waiting outside the barn. Rachel had her face turned up to catch the tanning rays of the sun. Cassie wasn't there yet. I figured she was doing chores. She had a lot of work to do around here. "Hey guys," I said. Rachel opened her eyes and immediately thrust a newspaper at me. "Look," she said, pointing to an article. I started to read the article. It wasn't very long. It said the police claimed there had been a disturbance in the construction site the night before. It said several people had called, claiming they'd seen a flying saucer landing there, followed by bright lights. "Cool," I said, looking up. "So the cops know about it now. That's a relief." "Keep reading," Rachel said. The article went on to say the police had arrived on the scene and found a group of teenagers playing with fireworks. The teenagers had run away. Fireworks were discovered at the scene. The police spokesman had laughed at the reports of flying saucers. "It's just a bunch of kids playing where they shouldn't have been," he said. "There were definitely no flying saucers. People shouldn't be so quick to believe nonsense." "But that's a total lie," I said. "Ding ding ding! Correct answer! Johnny, tell our contestant what he's won," Marco said. "Did you see the last part?" Rachel pressed. I read the last sentence. It froze me up good, I can tell you. Police were offering a reward for information on the teenagers. "They're looking for us," Marco said. "Why would the police be... why would they lie?" I wondered aloud. But the answer was pretty obvious. Marco laughed his sardonic laugh. "Let's see, Captain Brilliant. Would it be because the cops are controllers?" "Probably not all the cops," Tobias pointed out. "If the police have been infiltrated by controllers, who knows how many others have too?" Rachel asked. "Teachers? People in the government? Newspaper and TV?" "Math teachers for sure," Marco joked. We all looked around nervously, like we expected to find ourselves surrounded by controllers. "I tried to tell myself it was all a dream," Rachel said. "Been there," I said. For a while, no one said anything. We all felt the same terrible feeling, like we were all alone. Like suddenly we were dealing with stuff that was way, way, way over our heads. Marco spoke first. "Look, why do we have to deal with this? I say we just forget it. We never talk about it. We never morph. We just deal with our own lives." Tobias and Rachel both looked at me. They were waiting for me to argue with Marco. "Marco, I halfway agree with you," I started to say. Suddenly, Marco just went ballistic. "We could get killed," he yelled. "Don't you get it? You saw what happened to the Andalite. This is radical stuff, Jake. This is for real. Real. We could all get killed." Tobias was looking at Marco with this sideways look, like he thought maybe Marco was some kind of coward. I knew better. Marco had his reasons. Marco shook his head. In a quiet voice he said, "Look, I think these controllers are jerks, but if something happened to me, my dad, he wouldn't be able to handle it. 2 years ago, Marco's mom died. She drowned. They never even found the body. Marco's dad lost it big time. He totally fell apart. He quit his job as an industrial engineer because he couldn't handle being around other people. Now he was just working as a night janitor, making barely enough to support Marco. He spent his days sleeping or watching TV with the sound off. You can all think I'm a weasel if you want," Marco said. "I don't care. But if I get killed or something, my dad will flat out die. He's only hanging in there because of me." I wondered if I should go pat him on the back or something. But if I had, Marco, being Marco, would have just said something sarcastic. "There's Cassie," Rachel said, shielding her eyes and looking off across the open field. A horse, galloping across the green. Its black mane was flying in a warm breeze. I didn't see any rider. The horse slowed, trotting closer, and suddenly, I had a strange feeling about the horse. "Cassie and I have been here for a while," Rachel said by way of explanation. "She's really good at this. Look how fast she can do it." The horse nickered softly. Then the animal began to melt. The big brown eyes became slightly smaller. The long muzzle became a human mouth. A thing that was part horse and part Cassie smiled at us with big horse teeth and said, "Hey kids." Markle suddenly sat down, very hard. He had never seen morphing. "It's cool," I said, trying to sound very relaxed. It's just Cassie. I decided I'd better be a gentleman and look away. After all, when Tobias and I had morphed, we'd kind of morphed right out of our clothes. But I noticed that as Cassie emerged from the horse, she was wearing a skin-tight blue outfit, one of those outfits girls wear to do aerobics. I watched and saw something beautiful happen. For just a few seconds, she stayed half horse and half human. She reminded me of the Andalite. I realized it was deliberate. Cassie was controlling the way she morphed. "Geez, Rachel," I said. "You're right. Cassie is good." Suddenly, we heard the sound of tires on gravel. We spun around. Down the gravel and dirt road came a single black and white car. "The cops!" Tobias cried. Hi, everyone. Against all odds, we've made it through another episode. Hope everyone's having a good time. If you have any feedback or you just want to talk to me, you can reach me at audiomorphscast@gmail.com or audiomorphscast.tumblr.com. You can find more of this podcast at soundcloud.com/audiomorphscast. Well, that's all I really have for you this week, so I will just see you next time.
I change shapes just to hide in this place, but I'm still an animal. Nobody knows it but me when I slip, yeah, I slip, I'm still